Hello, everybody, and welcome to Star Trek Lost Stars. My name's Tony Morrow, and thank you for joining us live. For those of you who are joining us live today, if you're catching us on the replay, thank you so much for joining us on the replay. And if this is the kind of content that scratches that Star Trek itch for you, then feel free to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up, and be aware of when the next set of content is coming your way. But if this is your first time here and you're saying, Tony, what in the world is Star Trek Lost Stars? Why would I ever subscribe to you? Well, Star Trek Lost Stars is a 4X turn-based strategy game that some friends of mine and I, play online for the entertainment of you. We use the Federation and Empire rule set as published by the Amarillo Design Bureau, and we play it on a platform called Vassal, which is kind of a tabletop simulator. And then, of course, we live stream it for your entertainment, sharing with you the trials and tribulations of our various battles, the role play and the dynamic soap opera-esque excitement that comes along with that storytelling, and then, of course, the random chatter that comes along with any of that stuff. So that's Star Trek Lost Stars. Hopefully that is something that you will enjoy. If so, feel free to follow me on this wonderful journey today as I tell you about a couple key things. One, of course, we have, as per the thumbnail that you just saw there, the Battle Royale. This is a turn 103 reveal as well, and I'll show you the new folks that we found in the western reaches of the map. Also, we're going to talk a little bit today about the Triskelion Alliance. What is that? Who is that? What is the importance of that? And why should I care? And then, of course, we're going to end things off with a tactical session, which we will talk about sort of the state of the galaxy and the forecast for the next 10 turns and what that all looks like. But before I start getting into the details of all that business, let me just quickly hit a couple of updates here. One, we talked about the Baker's Dozen, the drive for the Baker's Dozen, the 13 players that we were looking for to be able to fill the roster for the next game. So 2 updates on that. One, we're at our 13. We were looking for a push goal of maybe as much as 15. We're dialing back on that right now. If you decide to reach out on Facebook, our Facebook page, and connect with me there, then, I mean, we've still got a little bit of room, but there's a lot of extra work that goes into adding those last 2 races or factions to the game. So we're prioritizing the 13 players we have right now. If you really want to play with us, then feel free to reach out to us on Facebook. I will put the link in the chat a little later in this episode. If you're catching it on the replay, I'll pin it in the comments at the very top, so you can be on the lookout for that. And the second thing is, you've heard me say in a couple of these live streams that new campaign will be starting in January of 2022. As you will soon see, as I sort of reveal reveal turn 103 to you, you will see that, as I mentioned before, the days of our lives as the world turns, Young and the Restless, pick your soap opera, or I suppose for those of us on the other side of the pond, Coronation Street or something of the like. Things are getting kind of exciting and involved, and it looks as though even if we were to go total war today, it might take a little bit longer than Christmas to sort of wrap it all up in a tidy bow, or a smoldering mess, as the case may be. So we're currently targeting still early 2022. There's no firm date on this. It's just a matter of when we all kill each other, and so it's going to be exciting to see how that all happens. Worst case scenario, it'll be a spring start. Whether spring is a March, April, or May scenario, we'll have to see, but that's kind of what it's looking like right now. And of course, between now and Christmas, we are on the journey to 100 subs. I have a little bit of good news, and I'll start with the bad news. Unfortunately, we had our first casualty this past week. We lost our first subscriber. A moment of silence, please. It's true. Somebody has left us, dropped off the subscriber list, and it's a tragedy. But on the good news, we gained a couple more subscribers, and we are now over 50 total subs. So we're now at 51 at the time of this recording, which is great. Looking forward to kind of getting us to 100. Now, why is a subscriber count important to us here at Star Trek Lost Stars? Well, as we've said before in previous live streams, the entire intent and purpose of doing this is to build the player base for this game that we all enjoy playing. The more players, the more community, the more folks that can enjoy the fun of this game, and that's really what it's all about, us getting together and having fun. So we're looking to try and build that player base, and on YouTube, the size of that channel, the reach that you have, sort of the size of the soapbox that you can stand on has reach. And so the larger we can get the channel, and of course, whether it's 50 or 100 subs, it's all really tiny in the grand YouTube scheme of things. But as we get bigger, the reach will get longer, and we will be able to sort of spread the word about this this fun game that we're playing to as many people as we can. So really appreciate your help in getting us to that 100 subscriber count for Christmas, and being able to sort of spread the word about the fun game and the fun that we're all having playing this Federation and Empire or Star Trek Lost Stars campaign. And lastly, change in format. So if you've watched any and all the live streams up to now, you've seen that I tend to go on for a good hour or more on these live streams. What you're going to be seeing in the next sort of couple of months is a slight change in the format. These live streams that you're seeing here today will still be however long they're going to be, and usually that's sort of a stream of consciousness thing, in the sense that we're talking about a topic and we're gonna get into it as much as we are, but going to try and sort of divide up or segment the topics a little bit more succinctly, in that the live stream will be the live stream, and then we'll take the live stream as it's recorded and cut it up into smaller sort of digestible bits. Think of it in the context of you watch the Joe Rogan podcast and then you watch Joe Rogan clips. And so the clips from the show, or those 10 to 20 minute segments that we'll be doing, will be uploaded as our own videos. Excuse me. And then we'll see if that is a format, size, a length of sort of viewing experience that the YouTube audience, that you will enjoy more or less. We'll see. It's an experiment to see what works best for the YouTube algorithm, but really most importantly you, which is to get a sense of what works best for you. For any of those who are watching who are also fans of other sort of sci-fi intellectual properties, whether it's Star Wars, we here at Star Trek, or any of the other ones that are out there, you'll see lots of different videos that have varying lengths and sort of formats. And the sort of somewhere between 10 to 20 minute mark seems to be sort of the sweet spot. And at least right now, we're going to try and play in that sandbox and see how that works for you. But please tell me in the comments how that sort of idea sounds to you, if that's something that you would enjoy. Would you prefer shorter format stuff? I mean, perhaps you like listening to my radio DJ voice, but maybe not for an hour and 20 minutes or however long this live stream is going to be. Rather, maybe 10, 20-minute sessions would be much more palatable for you. We'll see. Either way, we're going to try that as we go forward. You tell me how that works for you. But without any further ado, our first topic for today is the Battle Royale. Ladies and gentlemen, let's head over to the map and show you what I mean. Well, welcome here. This is turn 103, and we will do the round of the bases here shortly. But let me, as a highlight reel, show you what we got on the go. Now, we'll start from the top, and we'll work our way down. So as we go to the top, you will recognize Big Red. Our big Tholian red neighbors at the very top of the map, they are big. As we scroll down here, you will notice a green player. So, of course, the green player is in the chat right now. Let's laugh at the squids. These are the Hydrans. So the Hydrans are in Star Trek lore, or at least in the Federation and Empire map. They are sort of a... I know that Jim is going to love this particular comment. They're a bit of an afterthought, in that they are on the edge of the map, and they are not one of the sort of the core races involved in all the big stuff. However, from personal experience playing this faction in a game way long ago called Starfleet Command, which is just a computer game version of the tactical ship-to-ship simulator version of this game, I love them. The Hydrans are fun, exciting, they are fast, and their big thing in sort of the overlay of all things, all the different factions in this game. Everyone has their own little flavor, their own little quirk or feature that makes them unique. The big thing about the Hydrans is fighters. Now, if you want to think of Federation Empire and sort of World War II-esque warfare, think of the Hydrans as being carrier fleets. That's their biggest niche in the Federation Empire world, is they have fighters on almost every platform that they have. So they can launch these things and they can do quite a bit of damage in the game. And there's some sort of tactical advantages in gameplay that makes fighters really worthwhile. But as you can see here, the Federation, they are a monarchy as far as the structure of the Hydrans traditionally. And in this game, the player is playing them as a tyrannical monarchy. And they are, as you can see, sort of tucked in here between the Paravians, which are these red and yellow folks, the Tholians, which are big red at the top, and you'll notice another faction just below them. This is the classic pointy-eared Romulans. Now, as you may have seen, these factions are quite smaller than some of the other folks. These are some of the new players that have joined us in the game. They are currently playing their factions in our current campaign as a way to be able to learn the tempo and sort of standard operating procedures, so to speak, is how we play. Sort of getting the groove of things, knowing the little quirks and intricacies of some of the house interpretations of the rules, and some other things that we've come up rules-wise that address some of the gaps in the classic Federation and Empire rule set that doesn't lend itself to a 4X type of experience. So you can see here that the Romulans and the Hydrans are currently tussing it out. You can see that there is a rather large contingent of ships and things on this minor planet here. So this is the Kzinti. Now, let's just take a quick look into what that is. So this is the Kzinti. This is not the Kzinti that they're talking about. This is the Prince Fleet. So let's go to Kzinti. Kzinti, where are you? I'm obviously blind. I know it's there. There we go. Goodness gracious. So Prince Fleet. All right, so Prince Fleet. This is what they got. So you can see Prince Fleet here is comprised of a Y-era strike cruiser. That's the YCS. 2 light cruisers in the Y-era. A middle-era frigate. They have a total of 9 Y-era frigates, 2 W-era frigates, and look at that, 2 sneaky little Romulan frigates. They're called Snipes. And so the Romulans have obviously contributed to the Kzinti fleet, and this is sort of the beginnings and the root, really, of all the problems that are the Battle Royale in the Western Reaches. Basically, there is a dynamic that's at play between the Hydrans and the Romulans. I will remove the ships here just so you can see a couple things. There is this planet up at the top that is a Romulan planet. All that means is that when it was discovered, it was a independent Romulan faction, like a minor faction. And when it was discovered by the Hydrans, there was a non-player character, player character, role-play interaction that occurred there. And long story short, the Romulans did something very nasty to the Hydrans, something that could never be forgiven. So the Hydrans went in there and stomped them. However, at this time, the Romulans were already in contact with each other. Keeping in mind, this is all stuff that happened before they arrived on the map. This was, or when we saw them on the map, this was stuff that happened in turns previous. And long story short, that was the prelude to war. And the Romulans started poking and prodding, doing things that were very provocative, i.e. sending ships to support this Kzinti faction. And they just really stirred the pot in a really big way. And so now what's ended up happening is that the Romulans and the Hydrans are at war. But if that was it certainly wouldn't be a battle royale. No. We've got a couple more folks in the mix. You'll see the yellow faction down here below. That is the Lyrans, or sort of the Space Lions, Space Mountain Lions, that you will see sort of in the thumbnail. And they are also, as you can see here, very sort of tucked in, very tight space. And they were also feeling the sort of combined threat of the Romulans and their sort of poke and elbows kind of diplomacy. So they have worked with the Hydrans and jumped in on this fight. So it is the Lyrans and the Hydrans versus the Romulans. And just to add a little icing to that cake, the Carnivons, which is the green faction here, think of them as like space werewolves. I know, space dogs and space cats getting along, who knew? But the Carnivons, which is the green faction here, are also sort of getting in and supporting the Lyrans in the attack on the Romulans, although getting sort of into the fight might be a little bit more difficult for them. They're all on the same side. That is the Lyrans, the Hydrans, and the Carnivon, green, yellow, and other green up here, green and white, green and yellow and green. They're all on the same side, and they're all ganging up sort of on the Romulans. However, far be it for the Romulans to sort of stir this pot on their own. No. They're getting the Paravian faction in on the mix. So you can see here, as I just move the ships out of the way, see this little border here? So this is the neutral zone that kind of goes up this way. And as I put the ships back, you will notice that this ship is in or on the wrong side of that neutral zone, as well as the rest of this, there's a combination of ships here looking to explore and get rid of these fog of war hexes so that they can reach in and get in there. Now, I'm not party to the actual diplomacy back and forth, so I can't share it with you here today, but I can say on good authority, having spoken to these various players, that there is some power diplomacy going on with basically the Paravians staking a claim in this entire scenario, where they are looking to push themselves and force themselves into the scenario by taking on this Kzinti faction as one of their vassals. So, and they are claiming a finger, you might call it, a area of neutral zone that would surround this planet and connect with their neutral zone. So basically, what looks like a finger, one might call it a middle finger to the Hydrans, saying that we're going to take them on as our vassal. This is including some NPC roleplay stuff that's going on with the Kzinti and the Paravians going back and forth on their diplomacy side. And whether it's the Kzinti asking for it or the Paravians offering it, who knows? Either way, it's the same. It's the same situation that the Klingons dealt with the Paravians before. And as you know, we went to war with them over this exact same issue. And here we are again. So why is this a battle royale? You've got the Hydrans, the Lyrans, the Carnivon fighting the Romulans and the Paravians. It's a 3-on-2 action, but not just 3-on-2. The Paravians are arguably not arguably, they are one of the big five, but they are the huge big bully in this situation, carrying that big stick, and they are going to drop the hammer on what looks like the Hydran situation unless something gets resolved. Now, I'm sure that the folks in the chat will be able to sort of color the description on this, but suffice it to say that there is a lot of furious email writing back and forth, some diplomatic emails, messages going back and forth to try and sort this business out. And we can only hope that either A, somehow, some way, this fire gets put out. Otherwise, we're going to see the Paravians steamroll their way into taking this Kzinti minor faction, and in the process, the Hydrans and the Paravians are going to go full tete-a-tete. You're going to find the Romulans and the Hydrans going tete-a-tete, and then, of course, the Lyrans and the Carnivon here. But far be it from a true battle royale to only have two factions in the mix, in this case, the Paravians and the Romulans versus the Carnivon, the Lyrans, and the Hydrans. No. The Batman faction can't leave things alone. You will see that the Batman faction is, of course, right up against or very close to the Carnivon. And while I don't have as much fidelity or insight into the diplomatic backs and forth of this exchange, suffice it to say, the Batman faction is poking its finger, or its quite prolific proboscis, into Carnivon business, trying to sort of cut them off or confine them on the area of space that they control. Crazy. Now, don't get me wrong, the Borak are once again one of the big bullies in the game, and it's interesting to see how they're sort of flexing their weight in the interaction here. So let me ask you this, as audience members watching, and certainly the chat's going to get exciting when I say this. Let's zoom out here for a second. So we can see here's a good sort of depiction. We've got Big Red up top, the Paravian Horde in the middle, the Batman faction down below. You got these big three juggernaut factions, you might call them, versus these rather smaller factions on the western side. What do you think they should do? The western smaller factions, that is. Should they fight it all on their own? Should they get together and gang up against one or more of these folks? Should they call upon help from maybe the Federation, the Klingons, or whomever? I mean, is there a way to get the Paravians and the Tholians to fight, or the Borak and the Paravians to fight, or basically cause infighting in some way, shape, or form? What do you think they should do? How should they protect themselves, and how will they survive the onslaught of Big Red, the Paravian Horde, and the Batman faction? How do you survive that when you're as sort of confined and constricted as the Hydrans, the Lyrans, and the Carnivon are? What do you think? Put your comments in below. I would love to hear it. Let me take a quick sip of my keep calm and carry on. Really a message for the Hydrans at this point. Let me just take a quick sip. All right, let's take a quick tally of the chat. All right. Okay, so we got Jim, Paul, Daniel, and Chuck in the chat. Let's see. Oh, I like this. Okay, so of course as we were kind of introing the show, warming up the fusion beams in response to the warp core. Of course, fusion beams being a classic Hydran weapon. As the galaxy turns, I think that should be the name of our either next campaign, As the Galaxy Turns, or maybe that'll be the name of the show going forward, As the Galaxy Turns. We'll get like a soap opera intro or something like that with all the different factions. That would be hilarious. I think that would be awesome, especially if we could have all you guys come on the show and share and talk and sort of share your 2 cents about everything. That would be hilarious. Okay, As the Galaxy Turns. Tripedal tectacular trash cans, which are, of course, the Hydrans. Basically, it's Oscar the Grouch as if he were a squid. Fair enough. I like this Form Voltron reference. I'm not sure if I'm too boomer for this. I don't know. Maybe I'm too old. I don't know. But Voltron in the 80s was one of my favorite cartoons. I was living in Bermuda at the time, and I got like videos on cassette. So I got all those videos on, and I say cassette, like a VHS cassette. So I watched it on tape. And I mean, think about it. You've got, granted, Hydrans. How did the squid really form Voltron? Not sure. But lions and tigers and bears, oh my. You could get quite the Voltron-esque collection there, especially with the color combination. If you could get the Romulans in on that, woo! We'd have to create like an image of Voltron or Power Rangers or whatever sort of mech combo warrior you want to put out there with your color combinations. So green forms the head, red forms the body, and yellow and green and yellow form the arms and legs. Go Voltron. That would be hilarious. Sad that advice. Sod that advice. Oh, I'm assuming this is a colloquial term from across the pond. I would say a joke about speaking English, but I can't really tease the English for speaking a different language when it's English and it's really their language, so to speak. Pravia is gonna collapse real soon, says Chuck. Well, we shall see. Let's take this moment and speaking about the Western approaches and the Voltron faction, maybe that's what we should call you guys, the Voltron faction. Let's go to the other side of the map. Let me switch my head around and let's show you the other players in the mix. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here real quick, and we will see, as we talked about in last week's episode, we talked about the new neighbors in the neighborhood. So whether we want to use a Sesame Street metaphor here or not, you will see that there, of course, there is the Kzinti faction that is here in the eastern reaches. Since there's like 3 different Kzinti folks, there's the ones near the Pravian border, the ones over by the Hydrans, and now the ones on the eastern approaches. So I'm calling them the Kzinti in the eastern approaches. But there's these folks over here, and then, of course, we have the ISC faction down below. So one of the things that has come up in this game, which is sort of interesting, as I mentioned before, all these players are being introduced to this campaign, and we're finding sort of space on the map to introduce them. And that's how this is sort of evolved. That's why their factions are so much smaller than Big Red, Klingons, Pravians, or the Batman faction, or the Federation, is because they came in later in the game, and we're just sort of finding a place for them, trying to squeeze them in, if you might say. So in that context, that's why they're smaller, and you have the major 5 factions who are so much bigger, not only from an economic standpoint, but just number of ships. They can really sort of unload a lot of firepower on any one of these folks. We are potentially going to see that with the Pravians attacking the Hydrans behind my head here. We're potentially going to see that in sort of the next couple turns if things carry down this snowball of a road. So in order to avoid that, in order to create a fun environment for everyone, the player, as the Klingons, is reaching out to the Kzinti of the Eastern Reaches and the ISC. And instead of an adversarial relationship, which we certainly could have done, which is like go to war with them, stomp them, and so on, that's no fun for anyone. But also just think about it from this perspective. If we were to play on the same team, so to speak, then we're able to work together against whomever is sort of bugging us or getting in the way. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, each faction has their own number of slipways, but there's a maximum number of slipways you can build, slipways being the place where you build those ships. So, for example, you can have a maximum of 2 cruiser slipways, 3 destroyer slipways, 3 frigate slipways, 2 light cruiser slipways, and, I mean, there's dreadnought slipways, but I don't believe anyone's got that tech yet. So we're in a situation now where if you were maxed out with the total number of slipways or places where you can build ships, that's 2 cruiser, 2 light cruiser, excuse me, plus 6 for the destroyers and the frigates. That's a total of 10 ships, arguably, you could build per turn. Now, granted, of course, do you have the money to spend on all those ships? That's another thing. But if you had the money, you can build a total of 10 ships. Any one faction can only build that total number of ships. And the issue about building slipways is a real one because it costs a lot of money to build these slipways. It costs 25 EP to build a cruiser slipway, 20 for a light cruiser, 15 for a destroyer, 10 for a frigate, and so on. So it costs money to build them, and then, of course, you got to pump out these ships. If, for example, the Klingons went to war with the Pravians again, most likely are, they just seem to be poking everybody at this point. Let's just say we did. So if we went to war with them and it was just us versus them, then we arguably have the same number of slipways. But as we saw with the Federation, when the Federation jumped in with us against the Pravians, we've got 2 factions able to build full build sets every turn. We'll call it 10 ships. Full build sets of 10 ships every turn, which means we can put 20 ships or units in the field every turn to his 10. We are going to outproduce him over time, and at the end of the day, we will most likely blow him out from a combination of attrition, meaning that we're going to wipe out his units over time, or we're just going to overproduce. So if we were to combine our efforts with the Kzinti and the ISC in this case, now, granted, they're smaller, so maybe they don't have 5 slipways. Let's say they have 5 slipways. So we've got 10, they've got 5 apiece. That makes, still, we've got 20 total slipways of production per turn. We can put 20 units in the field every turn. The Pravians, best case scenario, can only put in 10. So we're going to outproduce them. Now they're at, you'll notice on on the map here, I can highlight it, but essentially they're just at the cusp of M tech. So depending on how ships are being introduced at what stage in the every race, every faction has its let me switch the perspective here while I talk. Every faction has its own schedule when ships appear or become available. The Kzinti and the ISC will have a different schedule to the Klingons. As an anecdote, what's interesting is the big three, meaning the Romulans, the Klingons, and the Federation, they're very well fleshed out in this game. And as a result, they have a very, we'll call it a high fidelity, like good detail on the schedule. What that really means is that it sucks to be the Feds, the Romulans, or the Klingons because their ships come out in this weird staggered routine or schedule, and it just makes it complicated and frustrating because the stuff you want to build it comes way later. You might get the level of technology, i.e. we discover how to build EVs, but it's going to take 10 years to build a Cybertruck. Or in this case, you discover MTech, that middle era technology, but it takes an extra 15 years to build a D7. That kind of thing. So in this case, the ISC and the Kzinti are able to build M-era ships at this point. The question is two things. One, have they upgraded their slipways to M-Tech? That is something you have to do. Costs 5 EP per slipway. And do they have the right ships available in their sort of shopping list? Have those ships appeared on their list of potential ships that they can purchase? I don't know. So either way, interesting to check that out. It'll be interesting to see what they can build and when. However, going back to the sort of the macro of this, what we're looking to do is build an alliance with the Kzinti and the ISC to make us all stronger, to be able to better defend against the sort of bad behavior of some of the big five, of which I am one. And so if we're looking to protect ourselves in that way, we're going to create an alliance. And in this game, and granted, the alliance rules are designed for the classic tabletop version, which effectively has like the Federation versus everybody. And the Federation has some folks on their side, but there's very clear delineations between one side and another. And so there's the alliance and the coalition, very, very Cold War-esque, and you run in those turns. In this case, what is the implication of forming a quote-unquote alliance for us in this game? Really, at this point, and this will be fleshed out as we go forward. First of all, this is the first time we've ever done this in this game or used this rule set in the game, so we're kind of discovering it as we go. However, fundamentally, here's the big impact. As we know, initiative is based on your economy. The bigger your economy, the later you go in initiative. So when you form an alliance, your initiative is based on the total of your total EP count. So add the Kzinti, the ISC, and the Klingon together. That total EP number is where you're going to fit in initiative, which means if we form an if we form an alliance, we will always be last in initiative unless another alliance is formed, because our collective economies will always be bigger than than any of the other players on the map. That being said, of course, perhaps the Paravians and the Tholians form an alliance or whatever. If they do that, then the dynamics will change. But at this point, that's the way that looks. Now, the benefits of an alliance are, well, there's a couple, but the fundamental thing that we're thinking about is this. If you are in a formal alliance, your ships can work together. If you're not in an alliance, your ships fight under your own national banner, so to speak. You fight independently. You can't have ISC, Kzinti, and Klingon ships form a coalition fleet and go attack something. That just doesn't work. But if you're operating on the same initiative and you're part of an alliance, you can group those ships together and attack a target. You can have a Klingon dreadnought bring in a fleet of Kzinti drone bombardment ships, ISC cruisers, and hit a Paravian target, by example. I mean, a Tholian we could, but they're a little bit of a far reach, and I don't see us fighting the Feds anytime soon. I'm just picking the Praevians just because they're close on the map. So what that does is that gives us a tactical advantage in each battle where we can combine our forces and make that happen. We can also use each other's supply. So as long as the Kzinti and the ISC and the Klingons are in an alliance, we can sort of mooch off each other and use each other's supply. So the infrastructure network that I will have already built as the Klingons along any one of my borders is something that those folks can tap into. They can also collaborate and coordinate their defense, or our collective defense, of those hardpoints, bases and things like that. So we get to work together better, work more seamlessly, kind of combine our efforts, energy, and our assets to be sort of a more potent and effective force in fighting or defending or whatever it may be. And the only price that we pay is that we go last in initiative. But let's think about that for a sec. As it is right now, and let's take a quick look. I will go back to the map here real quick. So here I've just pulled up the EP, and after I'm done this sort of soapbox session, we'll go through around the bases and show you turn 103. But let's just look real quick. The Borak have a 72. This is economies, right? So 72. The Carnarvon are 14. The Feds are still 68.5. The Hydrans are 18. The ISC, 17. The Klingons are still at 70. The Kzinti are at 24, so that's pretty good. The Lyrans are at 15. The Praevians are 58.5, so they've encountered a significant uptick. That's good. Or at least they were 57.5 before, so 58.5 is good. Romulans are 22.5, and the Tholians are 70.5. So there's three factions that are floating around 70 with the Feds just under that. So 70, 70.5, and 72. The Borak are ahead of everybody. But as far as we think about the neighbors that we have, the Tholians are 70.5, the Klingons are 70. That could switch any time, and the Praevians will always be lower than us as it stands right now. The Klingons, that is. So there's no disadvantage in forming an alliance. The only sort of quote-unquote disadvantage would be that if Kzinti or ISC ships are on the border, they can't attack first. And there's an advantage to that, without a doubt. But the advantages of the coalition or the alliance rules, I would argue, trump any sort of other advantage you would have, because they introduce other sort of problems or hurdles when it comes to creating the ability to cooperate. So when it comes to that piece, without sort of segmenting off pieces of the territory, it makes much more sense to run the alliance. So let me, well, let's do the bases, shall we? So let me take a quick sip of coffee, keep calm and carry on, and let's stand by to do our round the bases. In case it wasn't clear, just so I realized that I talked about it ever so briefly at the start. When I talk about the Triskelion Alliance, the Triskelion Alliance is the Kzinti, the ISC, and the Klingon. That's just the fancy name that we're using for, and it's a design. If you Google Triskelion, you'll see this sort of interesting. It's not a triangle exactly. It's this sort of spiral shape in three spirals that come together to form this unique shape called a Triskelion. And so anyways, that is the sort of foundational principle behind what we're doing. This sort of in three parts, all equal coalition or alliance, and that we're going to sort of face the world together. So the Triskelion Alliance being the Kzinti, the ISC, and the Klingons. Just before I get started, let's do on the round the bases. Let's do a quick check-in on the chat. A boot, he says. Yes, of course. I say about because I'm Canadian, so I'm sailing in a boat about which I don't know. Anywho, Daniel says, clearly there was a Kzinti diaspora. Clearly. You guys were like spread across the galaxy. You guys, I mean, whether it's Stargate technology or trans-warp conduits a la Borg or whatever the case may be. You guys were transpermia your way across the galaxy. Well, you know, kitties are quite prolific, I suppose. Sounds like an ancient empire spread across the galaxy. Exactly. Hey, Midget Manifesto has joined us. Hey, Midget. Cutting the videos into shorts makes a lot of sense. Sweet spot is about 20 to 30 minutes for most streamers. All right. So thank you for that little bit, Midget Manifesto. Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll see what we'll play with the numbers as far as times and see what works best. But yeah, we'll see what works. So with that, let's get into one more. I see. I dig the idea of you being a reporter for the Galactic News Network. You can interview the belligerents via video or email. I totally agree. I think that would be fun. Or sort of like reality show esque in the sense of you have like that reporter person, the advocate for the audience, who's like interviewing and talking to all the belligerents involved in the conflict. Sort of reality TV meets Star Trek meets As the World Turns. I don't know. Some kind of combination of those. That'd be kind of fun. But without further ado, let's roll into Around the Bases. All right. So as we're starting up, let me move my head to the other side so that it's just easier for you to see. We'll start with Big Red at the top. You will notice as we look at the sort of the bigger picture, we've got this Orion ship coming out of nowhere. Very interesting. Now these Orions as a sort of an NPC faction do pop up from time to time. They can cause problems, or depending on how you role play it, you can sort of pay for their services and use them to do some interesting stuff. In a previous game, I did that, and it was very expensive, but boy, was it effective. You can see over here in the corner, there is this Borak planet. Let's take a look at its first pit. So pit fleets. So there's two first pits. We talked about this before. There's a destroyer and frigate pit fleet, and then one with DNs and so on. I don't know for sure, obviously, but I would guess that the DN, CC, CA, and CL fleet is the one that's based on this planet, based on the fact that typically when these minor factions will populate, it will be proportional to the sort of surrounding factions. So considering the size of Big Red here, it makes more sense that it's the DN and so on. Also, the fact that they're Y ships and the current Batman faction player is in M era, so that makes more sense that way. So you can see that there is another major planet. Oh, yeah, major planet here. So sending a diplomat there to sort of deal with it would be probably on the priority list for Big Red and the Tholian faction, because their economy is just jumping leaps and bounds by doing exactly that. I'll come back to the minor faction, how that might play out, but yeah, very interesting. You can see over in the Klingon side of things, in case it wasn't clear, the Klingons took a major pounding sort of last turn. I'll switch my head around here just so you can see the Klingons a little bit more effectively. So there was a monster that appeared here, and I sent a massive fleet to go deal with it. It was basically 2 dreadnoughts, a couple cruisers, and something akin to 20 frigates. I basically lost half of that fleet. I think so. It was 9 frigates, 2 cruisers, and a DN or C8, C4B. I lost those ships in the fight because the thing was so potent and powerful. It had an attack that hit all ships at the same time. So the fleet that was on the battle line ended up taking the full brunt of the attack. And yeah, it was not good. So anywho, I ended up getting hammered in that regard. Lost the base, of course, and the ships that were involved in the attack. I lost them. It's unfortunate, but there was that. But not to be outdone, the Juggernaut faction near at the bottom here was in Oscar 30, and so the Federation attacked them and I attacked them. Between the two of us, we sort of took them out. I went and sort of engaged them with a frigate, 4 frigates, a cruiser, and a dreadnought. Lost everything in that encounter, which means my total ships lost to that specific fleet was 19 frigates lost, 2 cruisers, and a dreadnought against that particular fleet. Unbelievable. And just as a reminder, that fleet is a GW era, so the highest level tech. They have a Dreadnought TAC A, which is, I'm assuming, an assault dreadnought. It has an 18 attack, 16 defense. The cruiser is a 12 attack, both of those ships being Maulers. Then a light cruiser, which has 8 attack, it's a straight 8 ship. A destroyer, which is a straight 6, and they had 6 frigates that were 5s. But they have this weird ability to regenerate shields, which means that you have to do 8 damage to them instead of 5 to cripple them. My total sacrificial fleet was able to cripple 5 of their frigates and destroy 1. The Feds came in and sort of polished them off. The Feds took out the rest of those frigates, killed the light cruiser and the destroyer, and the only thing that's left is the dreadnought and the cruiser, both of which are intact, like fully operational, but those 2 ships alone have a 30 attack and 28 defense. So they're still a threat, but it looks like they're going to be retreating back through that wormhole based on what I see here. So anywho, that's interesting. So big hits from the Klingon faction. Nothing really more to have explored, like no big discoveries or anything like that. As we go down here, you can see, of course, the big thing for the Kzinti of the Eastern reaches is that they were able to convert this planet from an independent to on-side. And so that's a good 5 EP difference on their economy. That's huge, especially when you're this small, relatively speaking, from an economy, which is why when we looked at their the EP stat, that they're doing really, really well. The ISC down here, again, nothing really big or big changes here, just that they're sort of exploring, continuing to explore and looking to sort of find more resources and build up their revenue. Interesting note down here with the Feds, of course, we saw that these 2 fleets went out, smashed the Juggernaut fleet and came back, so they're going to be repairing at this Wydock. There was a monster over here, which is where you see this CLM that's crippled. Looks like 3rd Fleet went up here, took care of that monster, and is now here at the Wydock for repair. We can also see that there is at the very edge of the galaxy, another monster that has popped up on the Federation radar. They'll have to send some ships to help deal with that. It'll be interesting to see how sort of powerful that monster is and what sort of impact it has on the Federation. Good news is there's not a lot here that it can do damage to, the monster that is, and it'll take at least 2 turns for it to do any damage, taking out a base or anything like that. But even if it does, it won't impact the overall supply. Overall supply of the Federation. They'll still be able to get everything they need. Quick sip. So that leaves this big area here, this sort of void of gray space, which we have continually theorized is where the Juggernaut faction is based. The question about the Juggernaut faction, which we don't know, because again, it's a new thing that we introduced to this game to sort of replace a player who had dropped early. The question about them is, are they an NPC faction that continues to grow and build ships and so on? Are they expanding and growing and sort of building an economic base? Or are they just the equivalent of like a sort of a robust minor faction with like 10 EP income, and so every couple turns they build a big ship? If that's the case, then there is hope that if we discover them, that we can take them out. But at this point, it's we don't know where they are, and they can just pop up these wormholes and start attacking us. It's very inconvenient. So hopefully they're there, and if they are there, then we can sort of engage them, beat them down, and take them out. Based on some previous turns, there were some ships that were floating around here. I have a sense that there may be, like, the Juggernaut faction may be based in and around here, but we'll see. If that's the case, our last player joining our crew here in this game. We'll be playing a faction known as the Remans. Remans, just in this case, are just the Klingon Romulan ships. So in the sort of history of the Starfleet universe, or the sort of the original television series, there was an episode you may remember in the original Star Trek where they encountered the Romulans, but the ships depicted on the screen were the Klingon ships, and that was basically a problem with the model. They only had the Klingon models at the time, so they used the Klingon models in the special effects. So they had to come up with a way to explain that. In the narrative of the story, or like the history of Federation Empire, what ended up happening was the Klingons and the Romulans did a tech swap. Basically, Klingons gave them Klingon hulls, and the Romulans gave them, I don't know if it was really the cloaking tech, because cloaking tech doesn't really manifest itself in Federation Empire, but there was a tech swap. And so as a result, the Romulans have a generation of ships that are all these Klingon-era ships, but with sort of Romulan weapons and cloaking ability and stuff like that. So the Klingon ships in the Romulan shopping list that we've done, we've segregated them as their own thing, and they are a separate faction. The Remans, a la Star Trek. Oh my goodness, why can't I remember it? The last one with Picard and the TNG crew. Somebody say it. Somebody give me a help out in the chat. I don't know why I can't remember what that's called, but either way, it was the one with Sinjon or whatever it was. Tom Hardy was the actor who played the villain, who was the clone of Picard and so on. For some reason, I can't remember the name of that movie off the top of my head. Either way, that's the faction we're playing at. They're the Remans. We'll call them the alternative Romulans, with the Klingon hulls. So maybe he'll be there. Maybe he'll be in another sort of spot on the map. We'll see. We'll see how that pans out. As we go to the Borak, you will see that the commercial convoy from the Tholians has made its way to the other side of the wormhole. We'll see how it sort of where it goes. It looks like it's probably going to head to... Oh, not there. It'll be here. It'll go to Zulu 48, which is the closest Wydok. Wydok, or Starbases, being the place that they have to go to in order to do the get the benefits of the trade exchange, which in this case, commercial convoys cost 2.5 EP to build, and then when you send them to their destination and they disperse, they give you 5 EP back, but not to the sender, to the receiver. So if I send them to the Borak will get 5 EP. I spent 2.5 to build it. And then so the way that works is that then they would build one, send it to me, and I get 5 EP. So this back and forth, tit for tat, scratch your back, I scratch mine. That's not the way that saying goes, Tony. Fair enough. Let's talk about the western reaches of the map. So we can see the Carnarvon are here, and as I mentioned before, there is this tension building between the Batman faction, or the Borak, and the Carnarvons, and potentially the Lyrans as well, because the Borak are pushing into that area of space, and as you can see, both the Lyrans and the Carnarvon have got no space to go. So there's going to be a little back and forth, a little bit of a tussle, and it's particularly sort of challenging because the Borak, as we saw earlier, they're the biggest economic faction in the game right now, and they're really like swinging their weight around when it comes to this stuff. I don't know how easy it will or won't be to be able to deal with them, especially as like minor factions like this. They just won't have the economic oomph to be able to build enough ships to really fend off the Borak unless another major faction gets in on the action and helps them fight. The only exception to that would be as if all the minor factions got together. As you can see here, the Carnarvon, the Lyrans, and the Romulans. The Romulans seem quite robust with ship count, and they have pretty good ships. And if they were to sort of flex their muscle, I think that they could cause some serious problems. If not for the Borak, because they have a very sort of narrow point of contact with the Borak. If there was some sort of a coordinated effort against the Paravians, I think they could push back on the Paravians fairly well, but we'll see how that goes. As you can see, let's just move the ships out of the way here for a sec. You can see that there are 2 resources that were taken by the Lyrans. They were, of course, Romulan, and they were taken. How that's going to pan out over the next turn or two, we'll see if the fight continues versus if there is peace in our time. You can see, of course, they're finishing a base here that'll finish next turn. It is currently 117 spring for this particular 103 turn. And as you can see, they're continuing to explore and find more resources. This particular planet, as we go up, was a Hydran planet and has been decimated by Romulan faction. And so it'll be interesting to see how that sort of goes forward. Did I just accidentally? Yeah, sorry, I accidentally clicked it and it moved. Yeah, that planet being there is going to be a sticking point, I think. If the Hydrans can get it back, it'll take a while for it to recover. We'll see. And then as we go up here, we already talked about the Hydran faction, the squishy tentacular trash cans. Tripedal tentacular trash cans are having their fun with the kitty cats in the corner. And of course, as we talked about, their fleet is not insignificant, and so dealing with them is going to be a pain. How the Paravians really get involved here will sort of color how this goes forward. And that brings us back to Big Red at the top. Let's take a quick look at fleet cap just so that we can keep on track of how things are going. As I mentioned, the Klingons got hammered last turn, so we'll see how the impact of that affects the overall. You can see the Borak now have 118 ships. That puts them near the top when it comes to total ship count with a 288 to 549 attack to defense factor. The Carnarvon have a total of 14 ships. Federation have 147, so they haven't really increased the number of ships. It looks like they may have lost one. 519 to 678, still by far the huge fleet leader. The Hydrans have a total of 18 ships. The ISC, 33. That's a great number. With a total of 110 attack factors. Notice the difference between that, the Hydrans, and the Carnarvon. Not exactly double the ship count, but almost essentially double the attack factor count. That's really significant. Klingons, as you can see now, we are sub 100 on our ship count, which kills me. We're floating at 94 ships. Again, I've lost like 30 this past turn, past turn or two. It's a big hit. We have a 308 attack to 346 defense with a total fleet cap of 382. The Kzinti, now this number is a little skewed because we have both the Kzinti in the eastern reaches, the Kzinti in the western reaches, and of course the other Kzinti faction sort of on the border with the Paravians. So this number's all out of whack, and there's not really an easy way to slice it up or just like divide it up. The Lyrans have a total of 25 ships, which is really good. Only 68 attack factor, so 25 ships is good. It's probably just a matter of like having a lot of exploration freighters and things like that. You can see the Paravians have a total of 87 ships. This is a quite deceptive number too, because they have 87 ships, but because of their relationship with their satrapies or their vassals, they can call upon those other ships. So right now, in real terms, when we look at the Paravians versus the Klingons, arguably, the Paravians have access to more ships. Once the Triskelion Alliance gets executed, that'll change. We'll see. The Romulans have a total of 26 ships with 81 attack, 130 defense. So that's really good. They're really well positioned relative to the Hydrans and the Lyrans and the Carnarvon. But when you get all those three factions ganging up on them, it's not going to be enough of a delta difference to make up for that loss. The fly in the ointment is really the Paravians. If the Paravians get in some major way, that's going to cause real issues. And then, of course, the Tholians, which are getting close. They're 121 ships, and they have 254 attack factors to 499. So here's one thing I want to draw attention to, and this is the thing I pay attention to in this context. The Tholians have now more ships than the Klingons, and a significant number more. They also have an attack factor. Traditionally, they've been low on the attack factor relative to us, but now they're starting to really close the distance. They are just shy of within 50 attack factors of us, and their defense factors are significantly more. That, from a sort of power balance dynamic, from my perspective, totally unacceptable. In the sense that, not like I'm going to attack the Tholians, but I need to fix that on my end. One way we're doing that is the Triskelion Alliance, because it'll sort of bolster our collective strength and hopefully deal with that. So that is the current fleet cap. We've done our run around the bases. We've seen EP and fleet cap and how things are looking. Let me take a quick look at the chat before we get into our tactical session. Tentacular, Jim says. That's hilarious. All right, so let's see here. Oh my goodness, Nemesis. Thank you, Nemesis. Why couldn't I remember that? That's just ridiculous. Oh, dear. Okay, Jim says, unless they are meant for someone else, in which case you can only get 2.5 EP. Oh, okay, so this is an interesting little sort of side note. Let me switch the camera angle. So an interesting note here is that in the interaction between the Hydrans and the Romulans, before they were officially hot shooting at each other, there was a commercial convoy that was heading towards or in Hydran space. The Romulans had said that it was intended for the Hydrans, but in secret, it was actually intended for the Kzinti as a way to sort of bring them on side. Because the goods were designed for the kitty cats and not the tentacular trash cans, then it's not worth the full 5 EP is what he's saying. So if you intend it for a specific target, you can't get the full economic benefit. And in this case, it's because really what ended up happening is that the Hydrans stole it or impounded that commercial convoy and are using it. So interesting note and sort of like an interesting interpretation from the game master on the gameplay there. Oh, I missed this comment from Daniel. The minor powers have really shaken up the status quo. Things will be much more chaotic from here on out. Absolutely. One of the best and most exciting things about this game at this point is the fact that the minor factions have been sort of introduced. I say minor factions. The new players have been introduced. They are creating a chaotic and dynamic element to the game, which is, from my perspective, makes it all the more fun. The more players you can get involved, the more sort of dynamic, I use the word dynamic, the more there's moving pieces and the more they interact with each other, the more exciting the game gets, because it becomes less predictable. And because of that, more exciting. And you have to be more responsive to what's going on around you. And it becomes just more difficult to be successful. So I really like that. Thank you again for the Nemesis piece. I Wormhole was the title of Cisco's memoirs. Okay. Let's see here. Treaty of Sambara. Klingons gave warp tech hulls, and the Romulan promised to attack Feds. Romulan gave Mauler tech. Oh, okay. So that was the exchange. Mauler tech and a bit of an alliance, and then getting Klingon hulls. So that was the back and forth. So that's really cool. Sorry, fracking autocorrect. Oh, yes. The Smarba and Mauler tech. Okay, yes. By the way, I love the reboot of Battlestar Galactica and how they used frack instead of the other word. I really like that. It was a really good way to get around the censors. And yeah, I really like that. ISC satrapy in Paravian space. ISC satrapy. Oh yes, there is a satrapy in Paravian space near the border of the Borak. Not really too much of a concern for us, although it is a major planet. So it's a 5 EP if someone were to take it. I think I'm just saying, if the Borak wanted to like flex a little muscle and just get a quick 5 EP boost, that'd be a way to go. Federation had 165 hulls last turn, now down to 147. Ooh. Okay, I didn't remember that exactly. So 165 to 147, that's quite a delta. And so what that tells me is the combination of the monster and, of course, the juggernauts were quite a significant impact. The monster, I'm not sure what the total impact on the fleet was, like where the big loss of ships was. But what this tells me, and this is sort of another interesting dynamic element, the introduction and sort of the proliferation of these monsters is really going to change things up. You can certainly go to war with another faction, but if a monster shows up and you have to divert a large fleet to go deal with that monster because they're so significant, it's going to really sort of provide a random, potentially equalizing force into the dynamics of war. Because if you fight a war and you're in a, and this often happens in this game, everyone throws all their stuff to the border and they don't leave anything in reserve, and then all of a sudden a monster shows up and you got nothing to throw at it, it's going to cause chaos and cause a lot of damage in your quote-unquote backyard while you're trying to send ships after it. And if it's this powerful that can take out essentially almost 20 ships, 18 ships in a turn, that's going to be significant. As we can see, real quick here, we know that the Paravians have a monster, and there was that monster that we saw at the bottom of the Fed, the bottom corner of Fed space. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. My people. All right. So as we are getting ready here, let's talk about the big picture and really a tactical session. Our tactical session for today is going to be focusing on the next 10 turns and what this all looks like. So as we were just talking about, we know that up until now, it's been the Big Five, effectively. The Big Five factions, Big Red, Borak, Paravian, Federation, and the Klingons. And they've been sort of having their way with things. And there's been this settling in of status quo when it comes to borders and relations and so on and so forth. We've had our little moments of like little peaks of discontent with a war between the Paravians and the Federation and the Klingons. Some minor tensions, so to speak, between the Tholians and the Klingons when it came to dealing with a minor faction. And no real involvement from the Borak. And now what we see is the introduction of 4 new players on the Western approaches of the Hydran, the Romulan, the Lyrans, and the Carnarvon. There's also another faction over in that direction, which we'll see hopefully in the next couple turns that you'll see. And then there's the Remans who will be introduced at some point. So there's 2 other players that we still haven't sort of seen introduced yet. And then, of course, we've got our Kzinti of the Eastern approaches and the ISC forming with the Klingons, the Triskelion Alliance. What does this all mean? Well, big picture. Because of what we talked about, and even the thumbnail of this episode, the battle royale that is occurring on the Western approaches has significant strategic significance. Significant strategic significance? It's a big deal. The fact that you've got a conflict which is effectively forcing those smaller factions to combine into a greater faction, like you're collectively ganging together for protection and self-preservation. And would that have happened without this sort of imminent threat of the Paravians coming in and causing all these issues in combination with the Romulans? Don't know. The fact that the Romulans are being as disruptive as they are, and the fact that there's 3 players that are ganging up or teaming up to defend themselves against the Romulans is quite telling. The Romulans are the, and this isn't 100% clear, are the Romulans teaming up with the Paravians, or are the Paravians just taking advantage of the situation? It could be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, who knows? But nonetheless, it creates a tension. If for whatever reason that Romulan conflict were to go away and the focus only becomes on the Paravians, that becomes really bad news for the Paravians. Why? The Paravians just finished a long, relatively protracted war with the Klingons, and then followed by the Federation. we can reasonably assume, and I could go back and do the exact calculation, but let's just do back of the napkin math here, that they have approximately 10 war turns accumulated. 10 war turns means that they have 10 to go, and it will take them 20 turns to bang that off or like work that down. As it is right now that we saw on the map, there was one Paravian cruiser in Hydran territory. When you, in this game, based on the rule set, when you cross a neutral zone and you're on the wrong side of it, you have to go to war. Case in point, in a couple turns ago, when I sent a fleet to go attack the Juggernaut fleet that was floating around the bottom of Paravian space, even though I was not attacking any Paravian targets, I had told them this was not a declaration of war. I did not intend any sort of aggressive action against them. I had to assume war status when I went into Paravian space. So as soon as you cross that border, you assume war status, which means you incur war turns. The Paravians have gone to war effectively with the Hydrans and now are accumulating more war turns. So we can assume maybe it's 10, maybe it's 11, maybe it's 12 war turns that they've accumulated. Are they going to have a protracted fight with the Hydrans? If the Romulan thing goes away somehow, some way, then let's assume 5 turns of reasonable conflict with the Hydrans. Just that. That puts them at 15 war turns. And then at that point, if we or any other faction, I say Klingons or the Triskelion Alliance or the Federation or anybody decided to poke and prod and force the Paravians into war status, it's only 5 turns, and then all of a sudden they suffer economic impact. Their economy would go down to 75%. And every turn that they're in that war deficit, it'll take them 2 turns to get out. So you could ride them for 10 turns at war. It'll take them 10 turns to get out of that because they're only getting 75% of their normal income, which is when you're at peace, you only get 50, and they're going to get 75% of that 50. Does that make sense? Like if their current economy is at 58.5, let's call it 60 for round numbers. Like they'll gain a couple of EP as they go here. 60 EP. If they get hammered and go into war exhaustion, they're going to go down to 75% of their income. So 45 EP instead of 60 EP per turn. Then if at some point they go to peace, instead of it just being a straight 30 EP, it will be, so 30 EP, and then, well, let's just do a quick little math here. So 25% of 30, I'm going to call it 22.5. That's my guess, just off the top of my head. So 30 divided by 4, 7.5. Yeah, 22.5. So they would have an income of 22.5 per turn. Put that into context. That's the same as the Kzinti. Granted, the Kzinti at war, but that's the same as the Kzinti. They would be so economically crippled that they would have great difficulty making any further progress. And because they're going to be in that state for a long period of time, all the minor factions that they were beating up on can turn around and beat up on them. This is like a spiral. This is a toilet bowl that they're going to start going down if they push this. And it looks like they're going to push it. But let's take a step back from the Paravian situation for a second. Let's not look at the war, the war turn piece for the Paravians. Let's just look at the positioning. The Paravians overall have, they have a fair number of ships. But if you look at the map, and here I'll show the map here very briefly. Here we have the disposition of ships. Now, you don't need to know all the unit count, but let's just look real quick. They have the majority of their ships on their homeworld, and then they have this massive fleet here. Why is that massive fleet here? It's to check the Federation. The Federation has this massive fleet built up on their border, and they have this here as a check because they'll go through this gravity well and pop this planet again if the Feds attack. Totally understand. But what the problem is that sticks, it's like an anchor to the bulk of their military, which means their military can't go over here and fight the minor factions. Their military can't go up top and fight the Klingons and the Triskelion faction or alliance if, for whatever reason, we attack them. Even if the Tholians decided to push in, and they've got a fair number of ships up here, although it looks like they're pretty friendly, if the Tholians decided to push in on Paravian space, they don't have the ability to react. The Feds have effectively tied down Paravian assets, and the Paravians are picking fights with other people. That puts them in a position where they're very fragile and very exposed. What about the Tholians, though? The Tholians are really well insulated. Look at this map. They have, in a calculated way, controlled the level of their exposure to the other factions in the game. Because there is so much of this gray unexplored, these gray unexplored hexes, there's no clear path of attack for anyone to attack them. Even if the Klingons were in a position to attack the Tholians, there's this really narrow corridor that we would have to go through. And from their perspective, they have these two angles of attack to be able to attack us. When it comes to the Paravians, there's a very narrow channel that they can get through, and they currently don't have one with the Hydrans, but they'll soon probably open up a little channel here, and there'll be a very narrow channel of attack there. Point is, they've created a funnel for all their potential vectors of attack, so they can concentrate defense in those funnels, and they can basically door jam anyone trying to attack them. It's really, really good. They're in a very sound strategic position. Look at the Klingons by comparison. Well, okay, we got the same thing effectively with the Tholians. We have a very broad and exposed border with the Paravians, but we've already talked about the Paravian situation. We are very weak against the Federation, although, to be fair, we have a very good relationship with the Federation, and we've collaborated and worked with them very well. I would say that with the exception of forming the Triskelion alliance with the ISC and the Kzinti, it would not be unreasonable in some reasonable amount of time that perhaps the Federation and all of us get it to be in an alliance as well. That would be very interesting. The Federation themselves, again, they have very well-controlled exposure to any threats. Not really a lot of threat from us, and a very narrow channel of threat from the Paravians. Look further south, we've got the Borak faction. Man, these guys are like, they're in practically the best scenario possible. Their most exposed border with the Paravians is almost completely undefended. They got nothing to be worried about here, and they've got bases and infrastructure in place that in case bad things happen, they can easily respond. Their only sort of angle of approach or attack are these wormholes, which they can very easily plug, and of course they seem to be getting along very well with the Tholians, so no harm, no foul. When we look at the factions over here with the Carnivon, the Lyrans, the Romulans, and the Hydrans, so the Carnivon and the Lyrans, they're in a really tough spot. They're really crammed in here when it comes to space and the ability to explore and generate revenue. They're squished up against the arguably one of the biggest factions in the game, certainly economically, and from a fleet perspective, they're going to build out their fleet probably fairly soon. The Lyrans specifically are boarded up against up to this point, a rather hostile neighbor, which is the Romulans, and are facing threats from the Paravians. The Romulans themselves, okay, whether it's from their own sort of antagonizing or not, they are in a situation where they're being attacked on multiple fronts, and they are very vulnerable. Even if they've got the Paravians as help, the Paravians don't have a lot of ships to be able to send to help them, and the Paravians don't have the ability at this point in any reasonable amount of time, i.e. 2 turns, 3 turns, to be able to reach out and touch and cause significant impact to the Hydrans or anybody else. The Hydrans, on the other hand, are probably in the best, arguably worst shape of everybody in the Western approaches. Of the minor factions, they have, as it stands right now, the biggest footprint that they can explore. The only sort of hiccup in their situation is what's going on with this Kzinti faction, meaning that it is a very big rock in their shoe, causing all sorts of pains and problems. if they can resolve this in some way, shape, or form, it'll be relatively smooth sailing, and they can coordinate and consolidate their efforts to defend against the Praevians, and that'll be far less of an issue. But considering the Praevians' interest is the Kzinti, it'll be very interesting to see how that dynamic changes. Now, let's talk about the rumor mill. Before I go into the rumor mill, let me just quickly go back to the comments here. Oh my goodness. Okay, so ISC, Satrapy, and Praevian Space. We saw that. There must be another ISC on the map, Tony. I don't have 33 ships. Oh, that might be the minor faction. Let's go take a quick look at the minor faction as I'm looking at it here. Yeah, so the minor faction has 9, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. The minor faction has 17 ships. So 17 ships off your 33 makes the difference there. What else we got here? Anyone ever played Starfleet Warlord? Never heard of it. That's Chuck saying that. Daniel says, not knowing what type of monster you are fighting can result in serious issues if you rush into attack, which I have paid the price for now multiple times. Chuck says, I had 2 in the first 10 turns. They have a like when you defeat a monster, there is a benefit when it comes to tech. You might get a little bit of a tech boost, but the tech boost seems to be not proportional relative to the sort of threat it represents. So interesting. Jim Howard talks about a defensive pact. It's 75% total, down from 100. I think we're talking about the price that the Praevians would pay. Good fences make for good neighbors. Totally agree. And walls work too, says Chuck. All right. Let's go into rumors, shall we? So in the role-playing aspect of this game, we know that the Hydrans are claiming to be the old kings from the Klingons, right? So there's 2 ways that can go. If the Hydrans, as old kings, reach out to the Klingons and make a overture that is, toned in such a way that it sort of demands fealty and things like that, we know from the way the Klingons have been role-played up to this point, and I can tell you, that the response will be highly negative. To be able to massage that message in a good way and to sort of call upon or ask for help in the context of the of what's happening with the Praevians bullying the Hydrans, there's a lot of opportunity there, specifically considering the Kzinti, like the exact situation that the Hydrans are dealing with the Praevians is the mirror image of what we dealt with them on the Praevian front. So we know that we had the exact same problem that we dealt with from them that they dealt with us. So, I mean, it's there's a lot of room for sympathy and collaboration there. However, now that the Triskelion Alliance is being formed, one of the things that we're going to have to discuss is how we decide when we go to war. Because when the Alliance goes to war, we all go to war, so we all have to agree on it. So we're going to have a discussion around that. We know that because of sort of the bully nature, and we've seen it from the past, the feds are really easily convinced to jump in on behalf of the wronged party. So if the Paravians are picking a fight with a minor faction like they are, they're possibly, reasonably, arguably easily, there could be a really good and easy way that the feds could get in on this fight and just start another war again with the Paravians, even though they've banged up quite a few war turns. And then here's the last thing I would say. Big Red. The Tholian faction has been very quiet this entire game. And I don't think that's going to continue for much longer. As we've looked at the data around their fleet count and the potency of their ships, they're increasing significantly. They have increasing attack factors, and I think as a player that the player playing the Tholians is going to be looking for an opportunity to flex some military muscle. Who is he going to flex that military muscle against? It is unlikely it'll be the Klingons because we're just a hard target. I mean, right now, the border with the Tholians is kind of beaten up. So it's a little bit more of an easy target there. But the ability for them to reach out and really cause us harm over the long term, that's not a fight that I think they will easily win. It'll be tough. And because of the nature of Klingon ships versus Tholian ships, I think the way that plays out is really to the advantage of the Klingons. Are they going to go against the Paravians? Probably not. Not only because they have a really small sliver of access to the Paravians, but if you've noticed, and I think I highlighted this last turn or last stream, they are buying ships from the Paravians. So they have an vested interest to stay on good terms with the Paravians. So who else are they going to pick a fight with? It's not going to be the Klingons because we're a hard target. It's not going to be the Paravians because they're buying stuff from them and need to be on good terms in order to be able to continue buying stuff. Who else is there? I'll give you a hint. They're green, they're tentacular, and they enjoy trash cans like Oscar the Grouch. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how it's going to happen, but that's a fight that's coming. Is it coming next turn? No. Is it coming 2 turns from now? Probably not. Is it coming 5, 6, 10 turns from now? Probably. There's something coming from that direction that's going to be troublesome for the Hydrans. The factions that have presented themselves on the west side of the map have become freshly baked apple pies sitting on the sill, and you have a bunch of very hungry, salivating kids waiting to jump in on that apple pie. Probably not the best metaphor, but nonetheless, the factions that are on the west side represent a tantalizing target that is possibly too sweet to resist. So the question is, if that is the environment that's the scenario that's going to play out, how do you play that out in a way that is to your advantage if you're the factions on the minor factions on the west, Hydrans, Lyrans, Carnarvon, Romulans? How do you play that out to your advantage? If you're the Tholians, how are you going to play that to your advantage? You're going to isolate and segregate your opponents so that they don't work together. You're going to involve and coordinate your attacks with other big players that are going to cause this sort of maelstrom of chaos that's going to cause confusion. So be on the lookout for things that are designed to cause confusion, designed to cause divisiveness, designed to cause anything that'll take you away from being the strong pillar of strength that we need you to be if you're going to survive. Reach out for allies, form alliances, become the harder target, because right now you're soft and squishy and you look like apple pie, and boy, the Tholians like apple pie. So do the Paravians, so do the Borak, it would seem. All those factions are looking and eyeing at you guys as a way to exercise some military might. I'll be really clear. I don't think that's fair to introduce new players into this environment and have them be sort of targets off the top. But that's the reality. So how do we mitigate that? Put your comments in below. Let me know what you think of what you think we should do, how, or what you think those factions should do, the Hydrans, the Lyrans, the Carnarvon, the Romulans. What do you think the Tholians should do? Do you think the Tholians should pick a fight somewhere? And if so, where? What do you think about the Praevian situation? Do I have it all wrong? Do you think that I am just out to lunch when it comes to this? Are the Praevians in a strategic position that I just don't appreciate? I mean, yes, maybe. What's going on with the Borak? Obviously, there's something going on there. Are they looking to squish the soft, mushy, sort of new targets that are newly born on the Western Reaches, or are they looking to do something else? What's going on? How is this going to work, and how do you see it playing out? What would you recommend? Put it in the comments below. Really appreciate you guys joining us here today. I'm going to read some more comments here, and then, geez, look at that. We're like an hour and 35 minutes into this so far. Really appreciate you joining me. If you've stuck with us this far, and I can see there's 8 folks in the chat, thank you so much for being with us this long. Very impressive. So let's take a quick jaunt through the chat. Let's see here. Oh my goodness. Okay. I had 2. These good. We're talking about monsters again. Walls work. Okay. Chuck says the SFB game. It's an SFB game. Look it up. Okay. Jim says that was with regards to the Starfleet Warlord. Okay, so I'll look that up. Jim says, but they are spiky and carrying sharp tridents, referring to his tentacular trash cans. If the new Western powers don't sort things out and work together, it will not go well. Totally agree. Watch this space. Chuck says, I got antimatter rockets. Bring it on. Daniel's like, I got a rock. Oh, Jim's looking to trade for some rocks. And 10 watching a new first. Oh, look at that. We're up to 10. Woo! I see Bill Smitty has joined us live in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey, everybody in the chat, if you could be so kind, if you haven't already hit that thumbs up button, please feel free to hit the thumbs up button in and on YouTube, just to give us a little bit of a boost, a perk, a little bit of something. Really appreciate everybody being here, and yeah, good times. So yeah, this is a really interesting debate. This is the point in the game where things are going to get really interesting. And let's just map out one last scenario for you before we get going. Total war. When it comes to total war, wars that we fight in any way, shape, or form are going to take a while to resolve. Even at total war, if we were to go 10 turns, like if you think 10 turns, theoretically, the time it would take to put the Praevians into economic exhaustion, or at least the first stage of that, 10 turns of war will take us time-wise, as far as like how long it will take to process all that, will most likely take us to a point where we would be around Christmas. And in 10 turns, don't get me wrong, a lot can happen, especially if the distance to a homeworld is short. But if you don't have a sort of robust layering of self-defense or defense to be able to repel these attacks, then it can go bad fast. But most of the major players, major factions that is, have robust layered defenses that they will incorporate and deploy to be able to fend you guys off. So it's going to take a while, even if, for example, let's say the fleets of the Federation, if they went straight for the Praevian homeworld and it was only them, it would take them at least 5-8 turns to whittle down the Praevian fleet to a point where they could even reach and cause significant damage to their homeworld. And their homeworld, I haven't taken a look at it, but I imagine it's a fairly hard target when it comes to bases and so on. I'm just looking at it right now. I can see that there's planetary ground bases, 2 of them, and a YDK on their homeworld, which is surprisingly less than I would have thought. And there's a YBS at each of their other planets. So not as hard a target as I would have expected, but you know, they only have so much money to spend. They do have a lot of ships on that homeworld hex right now, so it would be, like I say, just a hard target to hit. There is a lot if the Federation were to go at the Paravians, it just would take a while to get there. The only thing that would speed that up is if there was sort of multiple angles of attack. And because they're in the middle of the map, that's kind of the threat that they are subject to. When it comes to the Klingons or the Tholians or even the Federation, they've got so much space between them and the outside that I just don't think that there's going to be any feasible way that you get close enough to cause them enough of that threat that it's going to shut them down in any kind of 10-turn scenario. The only exception would be is if somehow the Paravians struck first, and if the Paravians were able to use their mother pod feature, which is this ability to have supply and work as an expeditionary fleet. So they could go through that wormhole, operate within supply on the wrong side, arguably, of the Federation line, and they'd be within spitting distance of the homeworld. The only problem is that the Federation homeworld is a fairly hard target. It just depends on how much they bring through the hole there. If the Paravians were able to hit hard fast and do that, then I think that there would be, even then, the Feds would not fall suddenly, but it would be a huge hit, and there would be that would be the beginning death knells of the Federation, because I think that, assuming nobody else jumps in to help the Feds, which I think we would, but if nobody else jumped in to help the Feds, then the Paravians would be able to push that pretty well, and the Feds would have to like cocoon up or like turtle up to be able to defend themselves. The Borak, not even going to talk about the Borak, because they don't have a significantly powerful opponent anywhere near them that can threaten them. The Paravians are not. The Federation are too far away. The Tholians have one wormhole, and they are not interested, it would seem, to start a fight. And of course, the minor factions are not a threat from the Borak perspective. A nuisance, maybe. A threat, no. So, the path to total war. It's going to be a Days of Our Lives drama that's going to drive that forward. I think the roots of it are going to start with the dynamic chaos that is happening on the Western approaches, and it's going to be very World War I-esque in pulling in all the different factions. It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves, and it certainly is going to happen. Whatever's going to happen, I think, is going to happen within the next 5 turns. So, if you're catching us just now and you want to be able to see the drama as it evolves, then please hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing here, and make sure that you get that little bell notification on if you're watching us on YouTube, so that you're aware and alerted of when this new content comes out. Really looking forward to trying out the new content piece as we kind of move forward here, and being able to sort of help talk about the evolving scenario as these turns start pumping out. I have a feeling as the conflicts arise and the more sort of battles that get fought, the frequency of the turns is going to slow down a bit, because it's a lot of work to process the turns. But it's going to be very exciting to talk about all the trash talk that's going to be coming once the phasers start firing and the disruptors start being thrown and those plasma bolts start hitting hulls. It's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out. So, really appreciate everybody, with a total of 11 people now watching us in the chat. Thank you so much. That's double digits, like legit double digits. 10 is like arguable. 11, we're legit. 11 double digits, 101 in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. If any of you in the chat are not already part of our Facebook group, I will throw that in here momentarily as I'm puttering away. If you have not already joined us over at Facebook, then please feel free to do so. I will throw it in the chat here momentarily. You can message me directly if you want to be able to find out about joining our next game. Like I said, we're at 13, and getting to 15 will be sort of a challenging thing when it comes to picking those new races and mapping out the fleets and the what I call the shopping list and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be exciting and fun to sort that out. But if you are really interested in playing, then please message me on that page, and we will sort of go from there. Here, as I paste it right now, is the link to the Facebook page. I will pin it in comments to this video once this video has concluded, and we can go from there. If you have any other questions, then, like I say, you can easily reach out to me on our Facebook page. If you have any comments, queries, or anything you want to add that's colorful in nature, dramatic in its storytelling, then please feel free to add that in the comments below on this video. And I am really looking forward to seeing how this all evolves in the days to come. It's been a pleasure, guys. I will see you soon.